Good morning, MLP fans. We pretty much know where we're at, so let's just hop straight into it. This part will be covering resources. Starting with purple, there's a deck type that got a lot of power in this format that I've actually been neglecting, and that is Troublemaker Control. Troublemaker Control started becoming a real deck idea around the first real set that came out. I think it was Counterlot Knights. It didn't really have the support it needed to become a really huge deck, but that's starting to change now because we actually have cards that support the Troublemaker Control format. This is the first of the cards we got. It's Growing Pains, it's 1 cost, it gives all Troublemakers there plus 2 power. Its one downside, kind of, is the fact that it also affects your opponent's Troublemakers, but if you're playing a villain there, then it doesn't even matter, because your villain is going to be the only Troublemaker there anyway. It probably isn't the best card for Troublemaker decks, but I think Troublemaker Control is an exciting deck type, and I'm really glad to see it get some more card support. Plus, it's got 5 power. If you happen to flip it during a face-off, then it's still a pretty good card. Another deck type that was created in this new format is Chaotic Control. Chaotic Control is going to be really interesting because now when you flip cards, you don't just get power, you can potentially get a really good effect that affects the board. And there are going to be decks that rise that are pretty much just based off of Chaotic cards. Tempting Offer is one card that I think will be very, very necessary if we happen to see more play out of the Chaotic decks. It's 1 cost, it also has 5 power, you play it to your home, and whenever you flip a Chaotic card, you can move one opposing character that's involved in the face-off. There's a couple of things about this card that make it absolutely ridiculous. First of all, if you're playing a mainly Chaotic deck, then this is 1 cost to just get a whole bunch of movement. Just a whole bunch of movement. Plus, there's now new cards that let us flip even more cards, so if you're running something like a purple-orange, you can just flip for days. Every single flip means you can move another friend. Now, I'm also going to talk about the other part of this card that makes it great. There's nothing on this card saying that you cannot have multiple in your home. Now, unless there was some huge rule change that I just missed, there's nothing stopping you from having multiple of the same resource. So, if you have multiple of these in your home, then you can move more than one friend every time you flip a Chaotic card. Now, let's say you have 2 of these and you have a Big Mac in your team. You flip 2 Chaotic cards, you move 4 of your opponent's friends home, you're probably gonna win the face-off. Very potentially devastating. The last purple resource we'll look at is Utterly Drained. This is a very simple one. You pay 2, you put it on your opponent's main character, and while that main character is boosted, it loses and cannot have abilities. I'm not even going to insult your intelligence by explaining this card. This is a very good card. In fact, the only times I could see this being kind of a dead card is if your opponent is running something like Queen Chrysalis or something that doesn't actually have an effect on its boosted side. Another great thing about this card is since you really only need to play it once, like nobody runs the cards that actually get rid of resources because they're so situational, you only need to run 1 in your deck, like 2 at the very, very maximum if you really want to get rid of something. Moving on to blue, I want to look at Bag of Leaflets. This is a 1 cost that lets you have free movement. That is really, really cool. One of the things that I really like about this card is the fact that obviously it costs 1, and it says characters on it, so you can use it to move your main character to a problem that one of your friends is at. Honestly, this is another card I don't have to go too deep into because even if you only pulled this effect off once in a game, it would still be 1 to move a character, which normally costs 2. But this is something that you can do every single turn. Pretty much you pay the 1 for it the first time, and then every single turn you can give 1 character free movement. If you really needed to, you could just pay 2 to move the friend that this card is on to another problem, and then just start moving there. There's no downside to this card at all. This would be especially powerful on a card like Eagle that pretty much you just have to get rid of 1 pumped card to move it, so you're not even paying the action points. Obviously we can't get through blue without looking at a card that helps out Frighten decks. So here we have the Scariest Cave in Equestria. Play to your home, and rallying a frightened friend costs +1. Now, this card isn't quite as good as maybe like the Chaotic card we looked at earlier, but it's still pretty useful. Rallying a frightened friends and making your opponent lose 2 action points is already pretty good, but you boost that number up to 3, and every time they rally 2 friends, it's the same cost as if they normally rallied 3 friends. On average, if you're playing a Frighten deck, you're going to be frightening about 12 friends a game. This normally puts your opponent down by 24 action points, but with this card, it's putting them down 36 action points. And again, because it's unique, you can only have one in play at a time, but that just means you only have to run one or two of these cards and they don't take up too much space in your deck. Blue finally got its own element card with the Element of Loyalty. This card's effect is if you play a friends to a problem, or you move a friends to a problem, or your opponent moves one of your friends to a problem, you can move another one of your characters to that character's problem. Again, more free movement. I actually think it's kind of weird that they came out with an element card that has a much superior card in the set, which is Bag of Leaflets. But at the same time, you can just play this to your home, so that's kind of a plus. It only costs one more, and you're getting harmony counters every turn, so it really adds up over time. I guess the main bonus of this card is if you don't use it for a few turns and you start collecting those harmony counters, it really adds up and you can make one huge play during a turn that you wouldn't normally be able to. Okay, getting on to white, we have a potentially game-breaking card, but I think Interplay has learned their lesson, and I don't think anybody's going to come up with anything too crazy for this, knock on wood, but it's pretty much, if you're playing a chaotic deck, another way to get score points. You flip a chaotic card, you retire this card to score 1 point. I really don't want to see this card get completely broken, but it might happen, we don't know. Overall, though, I think it's a pretty neat idea. The only thing I'd say is holding it back a little bit is I don't know if purple-white is going to be the main way to play chaotic, but we'll see. Now, a lot of people aren't going to regard Alicorn Costume as that great of a card, but I think it's got potential. It's got a place in the metagame to say. Essentially what it does is if this card is on a friend and that friend has more resources than any other friend, then it gets +1 power in every single color. Oddly enough, this is kind of a card that we needed last format because this would have made crystal decks absolutely unstoppable. But we're getting it now, and this is definitely an interesting card to get. We can use this to make 6-color decks, we can use it to make, heck, 3, 4, 5-color decks if we really wanted to. Not a card we're going to be seeing too often, but when people figure out how to really make this card work, it's going to do its job rather well. White got a pretty decent action point accelerator in the form of Fashion Show. It's an asset you play to your home, and at the end of your turn, if a player has a friend with more accessories on it than any other friend, that player gains 1 action point. I'd like to point out that you can have multiple of these in play because it does not have the unique rule, and that since you are playing white, there is really no reason for you to ever not have the most accessories in play. Tangled Coiffure finally has a decent baby brother. Play to your home, at the start of an opponent's main phase, you may exhaust this card and pay 1, probably the one you just got from Fashion Show, and you may choose a character. That character may not be moved until the end of the turn. Some people are going to point this out, so yes, there are cards that allow you to move your friends and main character at the end of the turn, which gets around this effect. But in normal circumstances, this is a very, very good card. Just having one of these cards in play lets you lock down a friend every single turn. Heck, if there's one character you really just don't like for some reason, then you can pretty much just make it so that that character never moves for the rest of the game. The only reason I'd say that Tangled Coiffure is still better than this card is you have to constantly pay for this card, which honestly can hurt a little bit. It's a lot of the times not worth it. But the reason that I would say it's almost up to par with Tangled Coiffure is if you decide that you want to have a different target, then you can just choose to start targeting a different card, which is something you can't do with Tangled Coiffure. Stack of Suitcases is a card that isn't going to make a whole lot of sense to a lot of people, but let me explain it. So every time your opponent plays a card, this card gets a tip counter, and at the start of every turn, this card loses all of its tip counters. Now you may be wondering, why on earth would this ever be considered good? Why would you ever look at it? It loses all the counters every single turn, so it's not something you can save up. But essentially what this does is every time your opponent plays a card of any kind, whether it be a troublemaker, friend, event, resource, blah blah blah, this gains 1 tip counter, and the next time your opponent plays a card of any kind, they have to pay an extra 1 for it. So your opponent plays 1 card at regular cost. They decide that they want to play an event or something, they pay 1 extra for it. And now this gets another counter. Your opponent decides they want to play another friend, they have to play it at +2. +3, +4, +5, it really adds up. And of course, I'll point out again that this is not a unique asset. This is something you can have multiple of. So hypothetically, if you were able to get 3 of these in play, your opponent would play 1 card normally, and then the next card at +3, then +6, then +9. It pretty much limits your opponent to only want to play 1 card a turn, and that is pretty darn cool. Getting onto yellow, the first I'll look at is the simplest card in the set. You play it on a friend, that friend is a critter. 1 cost to turn any character into a critter. Let me be completely honest with you. Critter Rush has lost a lot of its potency and does not work anywhere near as well as it did in the base set. However, it's slowly starting to get some of its momentum back with cards like this, because if you can turn any friend into a critter, you can potentially do a lot of really messed up stuff. One thing I think is absolutely great about this is if you put this on a friend that has Caretaker, then they always get their effect because they consider themselves a critter. Blue Flu is probably my favorite yellow card to have come out in the new set because it has a lot of great potential. You play it on a friend, and at the start of a problem face-off involving the attached friend, both that friend and this card go back to their owner's hands. So that means, essentially, if you have the action points for it, you can play this after every single problem face-off, and just lock down your opponent's entire field. Like, it's something you can repeatedly play, or if there's a character you know is really problematic during face-offs, you can wait for your opponent to play that card again, and then just lock it down again. Every single time. It's an expensive strategy, but it works. Getting onto my second favorite new yellow card, Make Way for Breezies. Play on a problem, your opponent can't play friends with 3 or more power to that problem. Ouch. That hurts a whole lot, especially if you can play it early enough. For one thing, I think it's hilarious that you can see Applejack's feet there in the picture because this is the perfect card to get rid of orange decks. Very few competitive orange cards are less than 3 power, and this locks down a lot of things. The reason that I would say it's not quite as good as the Blue Flu is, first of all, if you play it too late, then your opponent will just move around their friends and it doesn't really matter that they can't play new ones. And it also doesn't stop a lot of huge threats, like Pony Royal Guard is still going to absolutely murder you. But if played at the right time, I could see Make Way for Breezies really messing an opponent over. Last yellow event is T-Set, Play to Your Home. At the start of a face-off, you may pay 1 and exhaust this card to have players flip 1 fewer cards during that face-off. I mainly wanted to look at this card because with the uprising of chaotic cards, this is going to be a very important anti-meta card. See, with all of the yellow resources I've looked at, yellow isn't necessarily the early game rush powerhouse that it used to be, but it was given the best options for dealing with the anti-meta. If your opponent just never flips cards, they never get chaotic effects. Just remember that. Outside of chaotic effects, it still has its uses. If you know for a fact you have enough power to defeat your opponent's friends and you don't want to risk it with the face-off, all you have to do is pay 1, rest this, and all of a sudden it doesn't even matter. You're going to win the face-off through sheer numbers unless your opponent has an event. They're not going to get lucky with some kind of flip, nothing like that. Finally, getting onto orange, we have Clipped Wings. Play on a friend, that friend loses and can't have abilities. Oh my gosh, the possibilities. It's hard because orange has so many good cards. Finding space for this is going to be difficult, but I'm going to say that this is a 2 of must-have in every orange deck. It shuts out Octavia, it shuts out Spring Forward, it shuts out Ursa Vanquishers, it shuts out Truly Outrageous if you're still dealing with that. If you're for some reason running an orange-pink, you can also do something kind of cheesy. If you play the Discord that has 7 power but has the ability this card loses 3 power, you can just play this on that Discord and it's just a straight up 7 power. Overall, I'd say this card is pretty necessary. Hazmat Suit for 2 action points. You can have a friend that would normally be moved home after a problem face-off is solved, not move home. That's really good. You put this on something big like a Big Mac or something, and it's just a friend that stays there infinitely that you never have to pay to move again. I really don't see why anybody would think this isn't a good card. The one thing I will say though is I don't know if it's going to be run too much, mainly because it costs 2, and you're really not saving that many action points, and orange has so much... See, that's awful when I have to say something like that. Like, the reason I don't think this card will be run is because orange has such good stuff already, I can't really find space for it. Okay, this is some straight up AM/PM stuff, way too much good stuff. So there are some colorless resources I want to look at too. This card, Boulder, actually has a version for every color, but I'm only going to be looking at this one because it'd be really redundant to look at every single one of them. Rather than just having event color fixers, we now have resource color fixers. You can play these cards to your home, and if you have no friends with that color in play, then you can exhaust this to have it become a colored friend until the end phase. A lot of people are going to see this as useless because, like, you can't really use it to solve a problem or anything, but its main use is it gives the color that you need. So for example, if I were to exhaust this orange friend and I'm running like an orange-pink, and all I have is pink in play and I don't have any orange, then all of a sudden I've got 2 orange in play. I will go out for the record and say that I don't think these are anywhere near as good as the event color fixers, but who knows, maybe somebody will find a use for them. Getting back onto Troublemaker Control, we have another amazing card for the deck. Play on a Troublemaker, it's a trap. Players can't challenge that Troublemaker unless they pay 2 action points. That's right, baby. You can now have Troublemakers that have Toll Booth. The great thing is, if you play this card onto a Troublemaker and your opponent pays the 2 to actually challenge it, and then you play something ridiculous to end up winning the face-off anyway, oh man, they have to send somebody home, then they have to pay to move that friend back, then they have to pay to challenge again, and you can have multiple of these on the same Troublemaker. It's so much. Troublemaker decks are going to be so cool when people start running them. Finally, the last card we're going to look at is the Element of Surprise, Element of Disharmony. I think it was a really cool and really clever idea for them to give Discord his own element card. It works just the same as any of the other element cards, except you're putting disharmony counters on this card instead of harmony counters, of course. And its effect is, whenever you flip a non-chaotic card, you can remove 1 disharmony counter from this card to ignore that card and flip a completely new one. Holy cow, this card is so perfect! One of the main problems that chaotic decks will face is the fact that you have to run a lot of cards from the older sets that don't have chaotic to make the decks run really smoothly. For example, Back Where You Began is a card that you're definitely going to want to run in the deck. But if it doesn't have Chaos, then you are completely wasting an opportunity. With a card like this, you can just cycle through them. A lot of people aren't going to see the necessity in a card like this, but I think it's going to be a one-of at least 1 in all Chaos decks. That's pretty much all I have to say on resources. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, those things really do help us out. Leave me your thoughts on the resources in the comment section below, especially if there's a resource you saw that I missed. And finally, subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudo news, and I'll see you all in part 5.